Calamity Jane. Her reputation was more of like a PR move invented by Jane herself. On May 1st, 1852, Martha Jane Canary was born in Princeton, Missouri. When Martha was 13, the Canary family made their way west. And during their 5-month journey across the country, Martha fell in love with hunting animals. Martha said herself, quote, "By the time we reached Virginia City, I was considered a remarkable good shot and a fearless rider for a girl of my age." The family arrived in Virginia City, Montana. As Martha got older, she became a tall woman with a, quote, "masculine build." And she realized that she actually could take advantage of this. Dressing as a man allowed her to work in places that didn't hire women. It also helped her live a life with more adventure. 1872, at 20 years old, Martha joined the Army as a scout. It was at this time that Martha earned the nickname she became famous for, Calamity Jane. She and her squadron were sent out to stop a Native American uprising. Now, at one point, Martha and the guys were ambushed. They all climbed onto their horses to get the hell away. But Martha saw that her captain had been shot. She got there just in time to catch her captain before he fell to the ground. She then lifted him onto her horse and then rode away to safety. While he was recovering back at the fort, her captain allegedly said, "I name you Calamity Jane, the heroine of the plains." Unfortunately, Martha was fired from the army when they discovered that she was in fact not a man. And when the media finds out that she's a woman, that's when they started creating wild stories about her. And she's like, yeah, I did that. Karen R. Jones, author of The Many Lives of Calamity, said Martha was well known in the, quote, rough and ready settlements of the Western Plains for dressing in men's clothes, a taste for liquor and wanderlust, and a tendency to shoot off her mouth and her guns. By 1876, she moved to Deadwood, South Dakota. People were striking gold around Deadwood, so Calamity found work there driving big wagons and hauling equipment to mining camps. One journalist who met her said she, quote, has the daring and courage of the lion or the devil himself. Calamity Jane really enjoyed this newfound fame. In fact, she started to add her own stories to the tall tales of Calamity Jane. And at one point, she said that she was a writer for the Pony Express, which was an early version of the U.S. Postal Service. Calamity said tons of writers before her got held up at gunpoint and robbed of like the packages and money they carried, but not her. She said, quote, my reputation as a writer and quick shot was well known, and they knew I never missed my mark. In June of 1876, she met a man named Wild Bill Hickok. He liked to exaggerate stories about himself almost as much as he loved drinking heavily. It was like they were made for each other. Wild Bill Hickok was murdered on August 2nd, 1876. So she hit the road and spent the next decade living on the frontier and like shacking up with a few different cowboys, I guess. By the 1890s, the Gilded Age was in full swing, but people still had like some nostalgia for those lawless days of cowboys, gunslingers, and gamblers. So Wild West themed shows popped up, and Calamity had a bit of resurgence as a performer. In 1893, she appeared as a storyteller in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. After her years of hard living and heavy drinking, Calamity Jane died on August 1st, 1903. Despite all her success in life, she died without a penny to her name. Even still, her funeral was held in Deadwood, and it was jam-packed. They buried Calamity Jane right next to Wild Bill Hickok. Whether all the stories are true or not, Calamity Jane really did live up to her nickname, and she blazed a trail for our next Wild West lady, Annie Oakley. In fact, Calamity Jane and Annie spent some time together in those Buffalo Bill Wild West shows I mentioned earlier. Annie Oakley was born on August 13th, 1860 in Ohio. Her dad passed away when she was just 6 years old. Annie would take her dad's old Kentucky rifle out and hunt for rabbits and birds. And she got pretty good at it, to the point where she was hunting small animals for the local grocery store. Now, this eventually made Annie enough money to be able to pay the $200 mortgage on her mom's house when she was just 15. So she decides to enter into a shooting competition in Cincinnati. And while she's there, she goes up against this guy named Frank E. Butler. Annie hits all 25 targets, and Frank, he missed one, which made Annie the winner. Frank was so impressed that he ended up asking her out, and they started dating. And the next year, in 1876, they got married. Annie and Frank start touring around the country. People just loved her. She even got the nickname Little Sure Shot from Sitting Bull, who was a legendary Native American tribal leader. Annie dressed pretty conservatively. This was because she didn't want anything to distract from her shooting skills. They get an amazing offer to join the biggest show at the time, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Buffalo Bill was the #1 marksman at the time, and his show toured all over the world and in front of important people. As more people see just how talented Annie is, her fame starts to take over. Rarely do you hear this, but Annie's husband Frank wasn't threatened by this. He takes a step back and decides to become Annie's manager/assistant. It was her name on the posters, advertised as Champion Markswoman. Annie performed her stunts in Spain, Italy, France, and even for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in England. Annie once said, quote, "I would like to see every woman know how to handle guns as naturally as they know how to handle babies." Annie spent 17 years with the Buffalo Bill show before she retired in 1901. When World War I broke out, she reaches out to the Secretary of War and offers to fully fund and train a troop of all-women fighters. She even offered to teach soldiers how to accurately shoot. But both of these offers were declined. "'Cause she's a woman, who gets her period. She don't know war." Now, at this point, Annie was almost 60, but she still was an incredible shooter. On March 5th, 1922, Annie hit 98 out of 100 clay targets from 16 yards away. Now, this not only broke all existing trap shooting records, but it also proved that at the age of 62, Annie was still one of the best shooters in the world. Annie Oakley passed away in 1926, and a few weeks later, Frank, her husband, passed away too. Annie actually made more than any other sharpshooter except for Buffalo Bill himself. Now, the last Wild West queen I wanted to talk about was one of the most dangerous criminals in Texas. She hid fugitives, robbed banks, cheated, stole, and did it all in a dress while riding side saddle. Belle Starr. Belle was born Myra Maybelle Shirley on February 5th, 1848 in Missouri. Her father was a farmer who actually made a big profit, but after a while, her father, got sick of the farm life and moved to a town called Carthage. Her father used the profits from the farm to open a hotel/tavern. They opened up a blacksmith shop as well. And before you know it, the family businesses ended up taking up the whole block. She was described as well-loved and spoiled rotten, and she went to this all-female private school. One of her classmates gave an interview about her saying, quote, "Would fight anyone, boy or girl." It was said she was very close with her older brother, who went by Bud. He made a point to teach her how to shoot guns, ride horses, and defend herself. Belle became a master sharpshooter and horse rider. Her life was just peaches and cream until the Civil War broke out. Her brother Bud became something called a bushwhacker. It meant that he hid out in the countryside, just waiting in a bush so he could shoot at people trying to take over the town. Even though Belle was just a teenager, rumor has it that she was actually a spy for the bushwhackers. By 1864, the war had totally destroyed her hometown and everything her family had built. Her brother Bud was shot and killed by federal troops. Her family packed up the few belongings they had and took the long ride to Texas. At the same time, a bunch of Bud's old friends rode into town, and they were part of a gang called the James Younger Gang. They robbed a bank, and they needed somewhere to hide. They knew that they could count on Belle since she was allegedly a spy for their side. Belle started to hang out around bank robbers and criminals after this. Belle reconnected with an old friend from back home. His name was Jim Reed. He was known for robbing banks, and Bell was into that. The two of them actually had a kid together, a little girl named Rosie Lee. So he tried to clean up his act for the sake of his family. He and Bell were strapped for cash, but he knew if he robbed a bank, they'd be set. So he robbed a bank. But once Jim resumed that outlaw lifestyle, he just couldn't stop. So he, Bell, and their little daughter had to flee to California. In California, Bell gave birth to their second child, a boy named Eddie. And even though they were now two young children running around, Jim joined several gangs. And one of those was the Star Clan. This is when Bell allegedly got very involved in these criminal activities. Apparently in 1873, Jim and Bell snuck onto the property of the Graysons, who were farmers nearby. They knew the farmers had $30,000 in gold coins. She and Jim tortured them by hanging them from a tree for hours until they gave up the secret location of the coins. And I guess now Belle was addicted to that crime life, because the very next year, she robs a stagecoach. There was a warrant out for her arrest. She knew she could outshoot anyone who came near her. The same couldn't be said about Jim. In 1874, Jim was shot dead by the authorities, so she turned to someone she knew, one of Jim's friends, Sam Starr. They end up getting married, and this is where she gets her iconic last name. Since Sam was Cherokee, they lived together on Cherokee land. This meant the authorities were not allowed to mess with them because Cherokee land laws trumped the local law. And apparently the two of them had this whole operation going. Belle would lace herself into one of those little Wild West dresses, and she would jump on a horse and she would ride it into town. So she'd ride up to a man and pretend to be this gorgeous little damsel in distress. She's like, "Oh my God, officer, I don't know how to use this gun. It's just so heavy." Now, while she was doing this, Sam Starr and his gang would be robbing the men blind. And then she'd speed off, still riding side saddle, holding her gun perfectly. And then the men would realize that this was a freaking act. Belle did this for years without breaking a sweat. But then in 1886, tragedy struck again. Sam was killed in a gunfight. So she marries Sam's brother, Bill July. After this, she was said to, calm down a bit. She was getting older. But then on February 3rd, 1889, Belle was riding into town so she could pick up a few things from the store when suddenly, Belle was shot from behind in the back, neck, shoulder, and face. Belle was found dead. Because Belle had beef with so many people, they never figured out who did it. I hope you have a good rest of your day. You make good choices. Goodbye.